Hey guys, I'm your trainer Tommy Ribs. We are here in Puerto Mogán, a tiny little port town on the island of Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands off the western coast of the continent of Africa. Guys, we're gonna go for an easy, relaxed walkabout. We're gonna see what we can explore in this beautiful town. Guys, off in the distance, what we see, as I mentioned, is the Atlantic Ocean. Look at that little yellow boat. What looks like a boat, that's actually a real life yellow submarine. So people come from all over the world to visit this town. That is one of the things that people come here to see. So this is an area known as Puerto de Mogán. We're out on a little point in the harbor. We got folks coming off of this flat bottom ferry. Check this out, guys, Puerto de Mogán. Okay, so we're gonna explore the harbor, and then we're gonna go into the little town of Puerto Mogán. Eventually, guys, we're gonna work our way up onto that cliffside village that we can see up above us. Okay, so just nice and easy. We're just gonna cruise along. Check this out, guys. This is and has been an important port throughout the history here of the island of Gran Canaria. Okay, so this is an area that is known by some as the Venice of Spain. When we get over here into the small little residential area, you'll be able to see why. So right up on the water, what we have are these houses built with that traditional Venetian style, and then a system of canals that go through. And then off we have the harbor and the port. And then what we're gonna see, guys, is an area where the boats are actually built and repaired. So we're gonna be able to get up real close, gonna be able to see all of that. Guys, check this out. Look down there in the water. Look at those fish. It's insane how clear the water is in this little harbor. So fishing has been an important part of the economy of Puerto de Mogán since the time it was founded, originally as a colony, a Spanish colony. So if you guys have done some of the other walks with me before, we've talked a lot about exactly this, about how Portugal, Spain, how they spread out their empire during the 1400s and the 1500s, leading all the way up into the 1900s. So both of those empires, both Portugal and Spain, they took part in what they called the Age of Discovery. So they spread their empire almost across the entire world. This is an area, the Canary Islands, that are part of a greater island chain known as Macaronesia, M-A-C-A-R-O-N-E-S-I-A. Macaro comes from a Greek word that means the fortunate. Nesia means nation or island in this case, so the fortunate isles. A lot of times people think that this is in contrast to Micronesia, which is down in the South Pacific, meaning the small islands. That's actually not true. It means the fortunate islands. Guys, check this out. If we look over to the right, you guys can see this is iconic colonial architecture. So colonial architecture, Spanish colonial architecture, you find this same architecture and the same designs for these streets, this urban planning throughout all of the different colonies that Spain established throughout the time that they spread that empire. So this was part of something that was known as the law or the laws of the Indies. Check this out, guys. This little channel that comes right through here. This is one of the reasons that this is known as the Venice of Spain. Lining this channel, we have that colonial architecture, And then we have these beautiful bougainvillea plants. So this architecture was part of what was known as, or it followed part of what was known the laws of the Indies. So the Indies is what erroneously the discoverers, as they were called, gave as a name to the islands and the mainland of the Western Hemisphere. So what they thought they were doing is establishing a new trade route across the Indian Ocean to India. This was important for spices, this was important for the import and the export of other goods. What people thought was going on is that they were actually cutting across, going the opposite direction across the earth through the oceans and then eventually landing in the Indies. We know now it was incredibly wrong. For some reason that name still stuck, so they called that the law of the Indies. What that meant was a group of laws that were political, that were social, that were religious, that were designed to help establish consistency in all of those different colonies. So part of those laws was to create this urban landscape that was consistent throughout. Because of that, you see really similar colonial architecture in places like this, in places like Peru, in places like Cuba, in places like even as far as the Philippines. So the Philippines was also a Spanish colony for 300 years. If you go to the Philippines, you see these same Roman arches, you see the same white stucco walls, you see the same colorful shutters and doors. Guys, over here to the left, we're gonna actually work our way over here into the harbor, and check this out. This is where boats are repaired. We'll get as close as we can. We can see this has been an important part of the economy here in Puerto de Mogán for as long as it's existed. All right, check this out, guys. Off in the distance, all of these boats, they come in here, they're lifted up with a crane, they're brought back, they're put on these jacks, and then they're able to be repaired. We'll come over here and we'll check this out first. This is incredible, guys. If you've ever wondered how you get a boat out of the water and put it on land, dry dock it, I'm gonna show you exactly how this happens. So right over here, guys, this machine, this is a machine so important, wouldn't be possible without it. So it essentially goes underneath the boat and it hoists it up, it backs the boat out and it goes around and it parks it. The boats come around right over here through the harbor. They come into this area right here. The boat comes, this crane comes over underneath it and it literally lifts the boat up, out onto dry ground. And then they back the boat out and they go over and they park it in this area. Look at these guys, this is insane. These boats are put on jacks and then they can come under there, and then if they need to repair it, they can do that, whether it's fiberglass or wood. If they need to seal it, if they need to paint it, any of the maintenance that needs to take place is done here in the harbor like this. So guys, this plan, this urban plan, is a system of grids. These streets that run north and south, east and west, typically according to these laws of the Indies, as they were called. What was said is that the reason they would design these buildings like this was to impress the indigenous locals. What they wanted to do is help them understand the importance of the empire. And then the other thing that was interesting was they would always put the religious structures and the political structures either in the very middle to where they were most impressive, the tallest buildings, or they would put them up on the highest point of a hill. The reason they would do that is to try to impress upon the minds of the indigenous locals the dominance of not only the religious belief system, but also the political system, as well as the military. So that's something that you find throughout all of these different colonies. Guys, this is so beautiful. Check out the colors. Let's just take some time to cruise through here and just explore these little streets. Guys, look at these flowers up here. This is, as I mentioned before, this is bougainvillea. Bougainvillea is a plant that's actually found in South America. It's native to Brazil, down into Argentina. These are different colors that have been brought here. This right here, guys, this is a depiction, a perfect depiction of that transatlantic combination of plants from the Western Hemisphere and then architectural styles that come from the Eastern Hemisphere, the Old World and the New World. Very cool stuff. Guys, come over here, come check this out. So if you guys remember, if you know, or if we were to back out and look geographically, we're actually only about 60 miles off the west coast of the continent of Africa. If you look at this building right here, or this little gazebo rather, this is influenced specifically by that close proximity to Morocco, that Muslim influence, that North African influence. Look down here, right here, guys. These tiles are something that specifically came from the Moors. The Moors were the Muslims that came north, out of North Africa, into the Iberian Peninsula. They spent 800 years in that Iberian Peninsula. Southern Spain, known as Andalusia, this is an area which was once known as the Caliphate of Cordoba. The Caliphate of Cordoba was that political as well as religious empire there that came up from North Africa, from the Muslims that worked into there, established political strongholds throughout most of that country and stayed in parts of that Iberian Peninsula for 800 years, parts of Portugal, parts of Spain. Eventually they were pushed further south as the Catholic conquistadors pushed the influence of the Roman Catholic Church down across the Mediterranean back into what we know now as Morocco and then the other parts of that North African continent. So guys, these tiles, this comes specifically from those Moors. So the ability to create those tiles. Remember guys, when we were in Portugal, when we were in Morocco, we talked about this word zellige in Arabic, which actually is where in Portuguese the word azulejo comes from, these tiles. So we see these in this area. We saw those there in that gazebo, that green color, remember the dome there. This is all influenced by the Moors as they came up into that Iberian Peninsula. Guys, we're gonna turn left. Check this out. Right up here in front of us, that bright red tree, that's a tree that's actually known as a flame of the forest tree, also known as a flame tree. If we get up there close, what you actually see, all of those are bright red flowers up on top. And then this is similar to a locust tree. So it has these seed pods, these brown seed pods that come down. And then I want to show you guys these flowers. So these bougainvillea flowers that I've mentioned a couple of times. There's purple ones, red ones, orange ones. These are actually named after an individual who captained a ship, a French expedition in the late 1700s. His last name was actually Bougainville. But what happened, guys, this ship was a ship that went all the way around the entire world. So it circumnavigated the globe. On that ship, there was a team of botanists. One of these botanists was male. He actually was renowned, world renowned for the work that he'd done. And his companion botanist, she was actually female. She wasn't allowed on the boat. Her name was actually Bare, B-A-R-E. So she dressed up like a man and she actually snuck onto the boat as disguised as a man for the entire voyage. So she actually was the very first woman to actually circumnavigate the globe on a boat, and she actually did that disguised the entire time as a man. So Bare is actually the name that we should give to these flowers if we're trying to actually give credit to the first person to bring that knowledge back to the old world. But because Bougainville was the name of the man who captained that ship, that's why we have that name. So throughout the world, it's variations of that name. In some places in Latin America, this is known as papelillo, which means little paper. You can see when we come up here and actually look at the plant, you can see that it's not actually a whole flower. The flower part is right here, and then this little part right here, it actually looks like really thin little paper. So as I mentioned before, guys, this creates a perfect combination of old world and new world. So old world being the European continent here in the Eastern Hemisphere, and the new world, these plants coming over from where they're endemic, which is actually South America. See a combination of that all over. Remember, guys, when we were in Portugal and we saw that Manuelino architecture? Manuelino is specifically the King Manuel, who was the king during the Age of Discovery. He liked to decorate those facades on important buildings as well as churches, and he liked to put icons, sculptures of different things that they had essentially collected during these expeditions, these colonial expeditions. All right, guys, we'll take a left here. We'll cruise out. We're gonna actually head over towards the beach, Playa del Puerto Mogán. So this is a beach that people come to visit from all over the world. The combination of that beach and the harbor, the boats there, this colonial landscape here that follows specifically those laws of the Indies, that grid system. And then what we're gonna eventually work our way up to is a really disorganized, essentially a labyrinth system of walkways and roads that work up to what's known as the Mirador de Puerto de Mogán. So the lookout of the Puerto de Mogán. Man, it's so cool to be able to see like the combination of all of these different cultures. It's also interesting, guys, to see how the Canarian language, the specific Spanish that's spoken here on these islands, how that has influenced the rest of Latin America. So this served as, these islands served as ports where the boats that were headed over during these colonial expeditions, during the Age of Discovery, during that colonization period, they would stop here, they would refill up their ships, and then they'd work across. Guys, check this out. This is known as Piedra Picua. This is an important stone for this area. This was actually used throughout history as a way of being able to tell how high the tides were, how high the water level was. So the different mariners, the fishermen, they would actually check out that stone as it laid there along the harbor. This would allow them to see how high the water level was. It would let them know if they could safely navigate these passages. So as there were reconstructions done here in the town, they actually preserved that stone and they used that as an important landmark. Guys, this is Playa de Puerto Mogán. Check that out, guys. Look at that beautiful turquoise water. Very cool. So we have the harbor off to our right, the water break off to our left. We got the beach there in the middle. And then, guys, we'll flip back around, and then we're gonna leave from the beach, and then we're gonna work our way back up towards the old town. This is sometimes known as the Cliff Village here of Puerto Mogán. Guys, the reason that Puerto Mogán is called this is actually because if we go further inland, we actually have what's known as the Valley of Mogán, which was an important archaeological feature. So people that lived here, the indigenous people that lived in the islands before that Spanish invasion, They actually used that valley as well as the access to the beach down here as an important resource. So having access to the water gave them access to the food that you can find, the shellfish as well as the fish, and then they were able to bring it back up the valley. There are a lot of important archaeological findings that have been discovered in what's known as the Valley of Mogán. So this has been an area that's not only been important since that Spanish invasion, that Spanish colonialization, but also dating back to the original indigenous inhabitants here of the island. Guys, this island is named Gran Canaria in reference to the giant dogs that were found on these islands. So the Guanches, the original inhabitants of the island, they used these dogs. They had these dogs as companions, but also they had these dogs as a form of a religious deity. So they actually worship these dogs. They're mummified dogs that are found, that have been found throughout these islands. A lot of different archaeologists and Egyptologists think that there is a link between the dog-headed deity that's worshipped within ancient Egypt and the deity that's worshipped here on the island. So because of this, that dog has actually, it serves as the symbol, it's on the seal of a lot of the different cities as well as the different islands. So here, Gran Canaria, it literally means the island of the great dogs. Guys, these are giant dogs. They're mastiffs. So they grow up to 160 pounds. They actually were used for a long period of time for cattle, so they would work the cattle. They were served, or they served not only as a means of working with the cattle, but also they were used to kill any of the other wild dogs that might come in and try to cause any harm to the cows. So eventually they stopped using them just because they were so unpredictable. Just these big, big dogs. Sometimes they would turn on and actually kill the cows themselves. Guys, check out how beautiful this is. We're gonna work our way up to the Mirador. This is exactly what I was talking about. This is the contrast that I want to show you guys. So this is an area where the buildings were built and they didn't follow the urban plan like you find down below, that grid system. They didn't follow what's known as the law of the Indies, or the laws of the Indies. This is an area where the houses were built, and after the houses were built, these ways to navigate were established. Because of that, you have these tiny little corridors that seem to just skirt their way around these homes with no real order. So we're gonna come up here and we're actually just gonna cruise around, try to get lost a little bit, see what we can find. I love this, guys. I love this disorganized type of little community. There's such, I don't know, it's just nostalgic to me. This reminds me of the neighborhoods in Rio. I used to live in Brazil, and these types of neighborhoods that literally just, the streets are built after the houses are built, just one layer on top of another. Very cool. We'll come up here, guys. There's a lookout. We can look down below. We can see the view off in the distance of Mogán. So there we have the playa, the Puerto Mogán. Off beyond that, we have the cliffs that come down. We have the Atlantic Ocean. We're gonna come down, we'll continue to climb up. We'll be able to see a little bit more of that. So guys, one of the reasons that the houses were so simple, the constructions were so simple in those different colonial areas, had to do, as I mentioned just briefly, it had to do with the change in the weather that was found in a lot of these colonies. So these colonies were unpredictable. There were things like tropical storms that would hit, there were hurricanes. Because of that, the structures were more simplified. They were these square stone or concrete, eventually concrete buildings that would be able to withstand those storms. They were very different, very simplified versions compared to the Baroque style of architecture that we see more in the Spanish peninsula. So it's a combination of those cultures, simplified just a bit. Let's cruise back down here, guys, and then we're going to work our way up to the lookout. Guys, another thing that's cool is when we realize how much influence there was, cross-influence between that Moorish influence that came up from North Africa, the Muslim influence, and Arabic, the language of Arabic. That is essentially the language of Islam. The Quran, which is the holy book within Islam, it's written in Arabic. If it's not read and written in Arabic, it actually, there's a belief that it's not the actual authentic version that it was intended to be. So because of that, as the Moors came up into that peninsula, spent up to 800 years in certain areas in what was known as that Caliphate of Cordoba, a lot of different language components crossed back and forth. So there are over 4,000 words, guys, in the Spanish language today that were influenced from Arabic. Check this out, guys. So beautiful. So essentially, any word in Spanish that starts with the letter A, there's a very good chance that that word originally was an Arabic word, and it was adopted by the Spanish. So words like alfombra, which means carpet, words like almohada, which means pillow, words like alacrán, which means scorpion, another word, ajedrez, which means chess, the word alcohol or alcohol. All of these words originally were Arabic words, and they were adopted into Spanish. A lot of these words, guys, were also adopted into Portuguese. Hola. Hola. All right, guys, we're gonna take a right over here, continue to work our way up towards the Mirador. Check out how beautiful this is, guys. I love that. Those white stucco walls, that blue lining. Guys, something that you see here on all of the windows, you see either a square or a rectangle, or you see a Roman arch that's actually painted on the outside. So instead of actually having it composed of stones, you see it painted on the outside of the buildings. And then at the top of each one, if you guys have noticed, there's actually a keystone. A keystone is that very top stone of a pillar, the top stone of an arch that's put in place that holds that arch together. So if you're building an arch, you build the stones up from one side, you build the stones up from the other side, you hold those up with some type of brace or scaffolding, and then eventually you drop that keystone in, and that's what allows that arch to support itself from both sides. So you see that in this area, because it's not actual stone that's put around, following that influence that you find going all the way back to that Roman Empire, you actually see that keystone painted in there in place. All right, here we go, guys. Let's continue working our way up, almost there to the Mirador. So how cool has this been, guys? Being able to see the combination of everything, starting down there at the very bottom. You know what? I'm just going to show you guys because we're right here. Check this out. Right here. The door right there, the doorway. We have the blue painted doorway, and then right above it, that stone, that's the painted keystone that's put in there. So that is a design pattern that comes all the way back to that Roman tradition. Check it out there, right on that door. Okay, here we go. Continuing up to the Mirador, or the lookout. We'll be able to look down and we'll be able to see everything that we'll be able to see from a distance, everything that we were able to see up close on that actual walk. I love this, guys. I love being able to get down in there, see stuff. A lot of times we don't know what we're gonna find, just discovering it, trying to piece together these different connections between cultures, between languages. Guys, this right here, this statue off to the right, this is actually just a memorial for a boy that died. This was put up there in 1991. So, all right, let's keep going all the way up to the top. Whew. All right, here we go. Let's come over here. We can look out. We can take in the views of this entire port town. We'll be able to see everything that we experienced. So we started down there, guys, off in the distance, that tallest square building. That is the point that we started, and then we worked our way around the harbor into this area, went through that grid system of those colonial houses, and then we went over there. We saw the playa de Puerto Mogán. Look how beautiful that water is, guys. That turquoise water. Flipped around, came across, and then we worked our way up into this old town, the cliffside dwellings of Puerto Mogán. Pretty cool stuff, guys. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end. This is just the beginning, guys. We're going to continue to explore more and more places on these walks. This is my favorite way to explore places. Just going in, seeing what we can find, trying to piece together all these little pieces. It's like solving a mystery. I love it, guys. I'm your trainer, Tommy Ribs, coming at you guys from Puerto de Mogán, here on the island of Gran Canaria, in the Canary Islands, in the middle of the Atlantic. Rest up, guys. I'll see you soon.